Warning, this is not a podcast for those who have got it together. We are men seeking answers to the questions that have plagued our mind. Can we be undefeated?
Hey, Eric. Appreciate you being on the podcast, brother.
Yes, sir.
I'm Earl Stricker. This is Positively Undefeated. Thank you guys for tuning in. And if you haven't had a chance, go to your favorite podcasting app, which could be Apple, it could be Spotify, it could be Google Podcast, it could be YouTube. And please follow our podcast and also review it. That helps us a lot, and share it. A couple of things we want to just ask everybody. If you haven't had a chance, go to our website, which is called evenoneless.com. It's still a little bit of a work in progress, but it's something that we're really proud of, and it helps you connect with us. And then also, we're going to have an event here in Elk City in Western Oklahoma at 105 South Main, which is the United Country Exploration Realty office in downtown Elk City. And that event is going to be pretty fun. It's kind of like a mixer. We're also going to have, we're going to have music. We're really introducing our not-for-profit to the community. And so we'll have food. We'll have a food truck. We're going to have a fun auction. We're also going to give, I think one of the items we're going to give away is a trip for two to, I believe, Cancun. That'll be cool. And so it'd just be great to get to know us and be a part of what we're doing. And we appreciate the support. Eric, I appreciate you being on the podcast, man. I've heard a lot really about you through other sources. My wife, she knows you. I guess she used to go to church there, and maybe that's how one of the ways she knows you. And she had been talking really highly of your story for a while now. And really, I was hoping that there was an opportunity for us to connect. And man, I sure appreciate you taking the time to come talk and talk about your story. Are you from this area?
Yes, I was born in California, but I've been here since I was 4 years old. Went through Sarah schools, kindergarten through 12th grade. I lived my whole life here. Yep.
What's your favorite thing about Western Oklahoma, man? Everybody, like, if they aren't from here, they don't like it.
Yeah, the people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think they have great people.
Yeah.
I agree with you. I've lived in Western Oklahoma for about 16 years. And, man, I don't think there's any place like it. Before that, I was from West Texas, which it's all the South Plains. It's like very similar, but yeah. I love the people. And my daughter said something yesterday. We had her on the podcast. She said that her impression of, or what, she's from here. She graduated high school from here and all that. And she said that the people here have a very soft exterior, but they have a very hard interior. In other words, they're very friendly, but then also, I think, like, struggling to get to know people, and the vulnerability and the honesty, that is a little tougher. And she was talking about how she was going to New York City, and she was saying that when she went there last year for the internship, that their exterior is very tough, but their interior is soft. And I thought that was interesting. Would you agree that maybe our exterior is soft, but maybe our interior is a little rough?
Some, yeah. I don't know that I totally agree with that, but some, yeah. And it's definitely different here than New York, for sure. Yeah, they do have a tough exterior up there, for sure.
She really loves it there, and she's going to go back there and work, and it's pretty neat. Man, are you are you helping with the Path to Miracles? What's your relationship with them and Sarah?
So me and Jeremy Gray, we've been friends for quite a while, and both have addiction in our past. And when they opened that place over there, I started volunteering and going in on Thursday nights for Trinity Fellowship. And then about a year ago, probably, it opened up to where they asked me to come on as the chaplain. So I spend from anywhere from 7:15, 7:30 in the morning till about 8:30 in the morning with the guys. We do a couple of worship songs and then read read through some devotionals and just talk about what we read in the devotionals. And then I'm available to those guys one-on-one. They have free time between 9:30 and 11 in the morning and 2 and 4 in the afternoon. So I spend a lot of one-on-one time with those guys too, just questions about the Lord, questions about recovery. So I have a passion.
It's a great place. I've gone there several times on Sunday, because like the group that I'm a part of here in Elk City, they go on Sundays, I guess, and kind of lead it. And I've actually led it a couple of times because they were out of town or whatever. Yeah, I really enjoy it, man. And those guys sometimes come over here to the meeting I go to. Yeah, always super friendly and respectful, and and I think that, man, that program, I didn't even know that program was here in Western Oklahoma. Yeah. Like I just didn't realize it was here and available resource. And sometimes I think that like people, that's part of our goal is to like make people aware that there's those resources here that you may not know of, and it's a Christian based organization. It's like, it's for men. Yep. But, I think that I've seen the things that it seems like very positive that it's done, for not only the community, but the guys who've gone there. I know they come from all over, but is there kind of, what's the criteria that they look for, and kind of who can come there? And like if somebody was interested and they're seeking help and they live outside of maybe Western Oklahoma, what's the best way for them to figure out if that's a place for them?
That would be a Jeremy question more than me, the chaplain question, but I think they can go, I think it's robsranch.org. I'm not sure. You could just Google Rob's Ranch. It's connected with the Rob's Ranch in Purcell. That's the 90-day version of the program, and Sayre's the 30-day version of the program. But I'd put it up against any Christ-based facility in the United States. I believe that highly in what they do there.
For Purcell too.
So
that's great. I've just been super impressed with it. I think that, it's been a big eye opener to me again, that there's a lot more resources than we realize even around where we live. To be honest with you, when I kind of went through treatment and all that, I didn't realize that there was those resources here, Yeah. And I think that, anyway, it's a great blessing to have that resource. And I want to talk a little bit about your story. Somebody told me at one time you were the biggest meth dealer in the area, but if you don't mind, I'd just like to hear a little bit about your story and how you got to where you're at, and really how God's worked in your life through that process.
Okay. Yeah, I grew up in church, and my mom had me there every time the doors were open. Yeah. So I had a good Christian background. But 4 days before my 21st birthday, my mom got killed in a tragic car accident right out here by Merritt Road. And instead of running to God, I ran from God, got mad at him and just kind of rebelled. And I just went through a point in my life where I wanted to die. And so I just lived as reckless as a guy could live for several years and started trying drugs and ended up doing about everything out there, but meth and marijuana were the two that really grabbed me. Meth being number one, but it had a hold of me for about 13 years, and I got put in jail in Texas, 4 charges in Texas in 2007, and possession of meth, possession of marijuana, money laundering, and possession of paraphernalia. I was on my way to Amarillo to pick up a load of drugs, and I couldn't make it to Amarillo without having to stop 2 or 3 times on the way out there to get high. So I had those charges, and then I got a gun charge in Oklahoma 2 weeks apart. I got those charges there. So I was facing charges in Oklahoma and Texas. In September of that year, I pled out on the Oklahoma charges and got 3 years probation. And I was still dealing with the charges in Texas, still going back and forth to Amarillo, hauling drugs back here. And February of 2008, I got pulled over again going to Amarillo, and I got 4 more charges: terroristic threat, possession of meth, possession of marijuana, and money laundering again. So now I have 8 charges stacked up in Texas, and I'm on probation for a gun charge in Oklahoma. So to me, it looked like there was no way out. And I'm just going to be real transparent with you. Up until that point, meth was my top priority. Whatever I had to do, however much I had to sell to keep supplying my habit. And when I finally quit, I was using about a quarter ounce of meth a day by myself. That's probably about $700 or $800 street value a day that I was doing by myself. But sitting in that jail cell over there, meth had been my top priority. And we weren't married at the time, but we'd been together since 99. So been together for 9 years. And that's when I started thinking about my wife and my kids, because in my mind, when I was sitting in that jail cell with all those charges, it's like I'm going to prison, possibly in both states, and so that's when I decided to surrender to the Lord. Mm-hmm. And He allowed me to get myself in enough trouble that I would surrender to Him and start following things out with Him. So that's when my wife and my kids became my top priority for a little while, and then later on I figured out God's got to be number one in your life, and if you put Him where He's supposed to be, number one in your life, everything below that falls into place and works out in His timing. So that's when I went out to Trinity Fellowship and met Andy Taylor and some of those guys. Actually, I'd been there about 4 years before. My wife, I was abusive to my wife, physically, mentally, verbally, all those things. And she had left for a year one time, and I went out there and I was just trying to get her to come back. I wanted word to get to her that I was going to go try to do something different, and it didn't work. But I went out there and talked to Andy and them, and they prayed for me. I told them they'd see me on Sunday. They didn't see me on Sunday, but I'd see him around town and stuff. And Andy never put any pressure on me, never said, well, why don't you come to church or anything like that. He'd just ask me how I was doing. I'd lie to him, tell him I was doing good. But it just spoke to me. I never felt judged by Andy. And then after those charges, I went out there and sat down, and they prayed for me again. And that was on a Tuesday. They told me about a recovery meeting on Wednesday night, and then church on Sunday, and a recovery meeting on Sunday night. And so I went to that first recovery meeting, and then started going to church, and it just completely turned my life around. But I remember early on, I went out there and I told Andy and them, I said, I got to quit smoking. I got to quit cussing. I got to quit the drugs. I got to quit. And he said, whoa. He said, you're going to wear yourself out trying to do all that. He said, the smoking, the cussing. He said, none of that stuff bothers us. He said, just pick out what you feel like the Lord's dealing with you about and work on that. He'll give you the supernatural power to help you quit that. And he said, just don't feel like you have to do all this stuff for us. Do it for the Lord. Yeah. And then, one of the things early on that I hated him for, and I love him for it now, but I would go out there and I would put out my problem, my dilemma, whatever I'm trying to get an answer to, and I wanted him to give me the answer. And he did the best thing that he could have ever done for me. He didn't answer my questions for me. He said, what's the Lord telling you? Mm-hmm. I said, what do you mean, what's the Lord telling me? He said, well, He's always speaking to you. Mm-hmm. He said, what I'd like you to do, he said, I'd like you to go home, pray for it about a couple of days, and if you haven't heard anything, he said, come back out here and we'll talk about it some more. And so he got me to where I was going and spending some quiet time with the Lord, and I learned to hear the Lord's voice. And so that's what everything these last, I've been clean now a little over 15 years. And these last 15 years, that's why I'm where I'm at today, is just learning to follow the Lord and His Spirit that's always trying to lead us and guide us. So where else I can go on and on? You tell me what.
That's a great story. And I think, part of, I'm always curious, how people recover and how they get out of where they're at, and you mentioned it right from the beginning. I've been there where it's like, man, you want to die, but you don't have the courage to die, it's like, I want to die, but I don't want to die. Yeah. And, for some people, they have a big hang up, same thing. I grew up in church. But at that point in my life, I was very disappointed with God, just disappointed. And now looking back, and we kind of talked about it a little bit yesterday, but it's like, I look back and I'm like, I had so much self-pity going on. Basically it's like my problem, what's going on with me, what had happened. And then, that I couldn't see the forest through the trees because I was kind of in that cycle of just self-pity. And I didn't know it at the time. I just thought, man, I got some problems and I got to, I can't figure them out. And what, for me, it's like, I always explain it like this. If I had 10 problems, which I probably did, like 10, maybe I was grieving about this, my cousin dying, or maybe I was, struggling with this. But for me, I had to get rid of alcohol first because I couldn't think straight to fix the other stuff. But I always thought, man, I can put a little effort toward each one of them. And maybe, it felt overwhelming that I had so many problems. And I mean, nothing compared to what you're talking about. I mean, wasn't facing a jail time and all that stuff that you're talking about. But in my mind, I was just in that cycle of just, but I know, like, for me, I was real disappointed with God because I'm like, I've been a Christian, again, my whole life, or, since I was a kid. And something that really, was important to me. Had preached a lot and, ordained minister and all those things. But I just felt like at the time that it wasn't helping me. Like God was not helping. This is not a situation like that he either cared about or, that he, for whatever reason, he didn't want to help, And so, I'm curious in it seems like a lot of guys seem like that they're disappointed really with God and they get caught in that. What do you tell those guys when they're struggling with things like that?
So I'll just share part of so I get frustrated with Christians sometimes, and I have to have grace for them too because I was doing what I was taught from when I was a kid, but God's been misrepresented a lot to people, and they feel like God's mad at them and God's up there and he's out to get us. And that's the God that I knew as a kid. And I was they used hell as a scare tactic to get me to make a decision to trust Jesus as my Lord and Savior. And that's just the wrong way to come into the kingdom, being scared of God, who's our Father, And so through my mom's death, I can actually say, the Lord showed me 23 and a half years later that my mom's death was actually a positive thing in my life. And it took a long time to get to there. But, I was that Christian that judged others. And I was that Christian, I was trying to do everything that I was taught from a kid. And so I was doing that to my classmates. I was going and scaring them with hell, trying to get them to make a decision, to believe in God and giving them the wrong impression of who God was. And so through my mom's death and my choice to go into the drug world, I thought I was better than other people. My friends, my high school friends that drank and did drugs and all that stuff. I thought somehow I was better than them because I didn't do any of that. And, I was saved and all those things. And then through my mom's death, I felt like I was less than everybody else. But then coming under Andy and them at Trinity and just the message of God's grace and how much he loves us. And then after experiencing the Father's grace, it changed my views of God and it changed how I represent God. And so that's what I just say to him is just keep running to him. He loves you no matter what. And so, the Lord showed me that 23 and a half years later, after I surrendered my life to him, he just showed me that through her death, I don't represent him that way anymore. I represent him as the loving Father that he really is. And then not only that, because of my choice to go into the drug world for 13 years, I have a few tools to be able to help other people out of there. So the Lord's always got a plan for you, no matter how bad you've messed up in life, because I messed up as bad as anybody, if not worse. But he's always got a plan for you. He loves you. He's there for you. You just got to run to him. Find other people that are encourage you, and that talk about the love of the Father and the grace of the Father and all those things. And it can completely change your life. That's what worked for me. So that's what I share and what I do with other people. I didn't go to rehab or anything. Here I am using a 1/4 ounce of meth a day, and who knows how much I was smoking marijuana like it was cigarettes. And so if the Lord can change me, not going to rehab or anything, just surrendering to him and walking through some terrible withdrawals for a while, and but he gave me the power to make it through all of that, So if he'll do it for me, there's not a doubt in my mind that he'll do it for anybody else too. The Lord sees us all the same, loves us all the same, and so
I think you bring up a great topic, which is what I've seen in like recovery. You have like 3 types of stories. The first story is that basically God took it away. It's taken away.
Yeah.
And then you have a story of like over time, that desire and that, it's more through what maybe them working a program, or maybe it's through rehab, or, and I think sometimes, like what I've noticed is that if we're not careful, it's like that experience that we have, if we put that experience maybe on somebody else, that their experience is different, when it comes to their journey. And I love it because you're talking about your experience, and what happened with you. And I think like that's kind of what our not-for-profit is really focused on. It's like, what is our experience? Where has God worked in our life? What has happened with us? And every person's story is a little bit different, know. But I think you can have a guy that looks at your story and says, man, God didn't take that away from me like that. And they really struggle because they want God to do that. They want him to just take away that, desire to do drugs or alcohol or whatever. But it feels more like a battle, and maybe it's a battle for, months or years or whatever, What's your thoughts on a guy that's in that situation?
Keep running to the Father. Yeah. He's going to show up. And that's what I just, surrender is a big word that we use with those guys over there. Cause, I tried it several times to quit and just never did work. But when I completely surrendered everything that I was to the Lord and started living my life the best that I know how for him, I mess up every day. It's not the same mess ups that I used to do. And I'm better 15 years down the road than I was 15 years ago, but it's just staying surrendered to him and following his spirit. And no matter what, I've had some big bumps in the road and some hard times that I've went through and some tragedies and stuff in these last 15 years, but just staying surrendered to the Father and in relationship with him, I've been able to make it through those without going back to drugs or alcohol or whatever. So I just say, stay the course. Just stay the course.
What does that look like for you? I mean, like when you, like on a day-to-day basis, what does that look like for you? Where you're talking about surrendering and just, what do you think, like just the basics of what that looks like for you?
Just staying in constant. I mean, for me, my journey's been all about relationship with the Father, just talking to him all day long. I don't listen to my radio when I'm driving. I'm always talking to the Lord, saying, he'll put people across my mind to pray for and stuff, but just staying in that constant relationship with him. I've got tasks and stuff that I do, but just getting better at having him in everything that I do throughout my day, and when I catch myself away from that, that's when things get a little tougher, or I get out of character and act ways I shouldn't sometimes, and just different things. So I just try to get my focus back on him.
Mm-hmm. When you were talking about like being in jail and like really surrendering at that point, was there somebody in your life at that point that really helped you through that? Or is it just really you were in that place where you were basically hopeless and reached out to God? Or was there, besides getting in trouble and going to jail, was there somebody or some situation that really made you stop and say, I got to change something?
No, it was all God and him allowing me to get in that much trouble. I don't give up easy no matter what I'm doing. I'm competitive, and it was kind of like a deal between me and the cops. It was me against them, and so I would get in a little bit of trouble, and I was already a felon before I got in this other trouble and stuff too. And so the Lord, I just believe that he allowed me to get myself in that much trouble where I would completely give up. Now, he worked through a lot of people in the beginning, but it was ultimately God behind every bit of it. He's up there orchestrating whatever he's got to do because he wants to draw us closer to him. And so that's when I finally surrendered and gave up trying to run my life myself, but all the other times they'd catch me with a little bit and I'd be like, I can get a lawyer and pay my way out of this, get some probation, and be right back to doing what I was doing. But that time when I was facing, and in my mind, I thought I was going to prison for sure. That's when I started thinking about the things that I really should have been thinking about the whole time. Yeah. My wife, my daughters, and that's what I was like, what are they going to do while I'm going to prison? How are they going to make it? And so he just used all of that to to get me to surrender. Andy Taylor, Charlie Kingsbury, Cody Custer, Buddy Southers, Daryl Perry. I could go on and on. Butch Black. There was just a bunch of people early on that spoke into my life and just encouraged me and surrounded me, and the Lord worked through all of those people too. Mm-hmm. So you've got to find a good support group that's going to encourage you and allow the Lord to speak to you through people too, because He's always doing that.
Seems like you have to kind of, like retrain your brain. There's some, you have the initial, I'm done with this, and you want something different, but then there is, I think like in AA, and they probably do it in other programs too, but it's discontent, irritable, and I always forget the third word, but I went through that right after I quit drinking. It's and it's because I was trying to think of it, or trying to figure out a different way to live, think differently, do differently. And so I was almost kind of going stir crazy, trying to stay busy, trying to, and I dealt with that probably 2 or 3 months after, quit drinking. It was, that was just, but it was kind of a growing time period. It's just really learning how to think differently and live differently. I guess that in my case, I went to that as my way of coping. And then I was trying to learn to go to God as my way of coping and really seek Him out. And, we talked a lot about willingness. Willingness to me is the key. It's you got to be willing, and it's got to be willing almost every day to do that same thing, and then, I think I look at it now that training during that time and still today, it's you have your little aggravations or your little problems, and it's really training me to learn how to deal when something big comes up, if I can deal with the little things, because sometimes the little things set you off worse than the big things, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so, I'm sure that especially in the first few months or whatever, and, you trying to live differently and think differently. And, and that's where the people probably helped you a little bit. It's cause we don't even know we're thinking stupid. And then you have somebody that, whether some people think of it as a sponsor or some people think of it just a mentor or friend. How did you deal with those first few months? Were you in jail basically during that time period, or were you?
No, I bailed out. I had my wife come get me out of jail. The first 2 weeks, I didn't do anything because I'd been up for a long time. My tolerance level, I was doing a 1/4 ounce of meth a day, and I could still go to bed at night. I could still eat 3 or 4 times a day. I'd do $150 worth of dope as soon as I got out of bed in the morning, and then go eat breakfast. And other people, they get $25 worth and stay up for a couple of days. But over 13 years, your tolerance gets to that. So the first few weeks, all I did was sleep, eat, go to the restroom. I'd get up and go to recovery meetings and get up and go to church. And after a couple of weeks, my body was just so sore from just laying in bed all the time. So I started forcing myself to get up, and I would go out there to the church and hang out with those guys and let them pour into me. So the first couple of months it was pretty rough for me coming off of that stuff, as much of it as I was doing day in, day out for as long as I had. But man, when I made that decision, it's really that simple as making that decision in your mind that you're done and surrendering to the Lord. That's just a combination right there that I believe in with all my heart. And that's what I'm always told that I'm different because I speak up for people and I try to get people a chance. I've got, I'm friends with district attorneys and stuff now. And so I speak up, and they're just not people out there like you. There's just not people. So I just know that the Lord did something supernatural with me that maybe not everybody, that not everybody's used to, but I didn't have the cravings. I didn't have the, want to and stuff in that first couple months. I was the Lord.
When you see guys nowadays, it's what are ways are you, I know you're doing, again, the chaplain position there and at Rob's Ranch and, working with Trinity. The things that when I'm hearing your story, it's man, obviously that turn your life and your will over to God is a big deal.
Huge.
And then I think community has been a big deal also for you. And I think that like if you literally go home and you went to the same situation, you're not going up to the church, you're not going to those recovery meetings. It's like you changing, not to be cliche, but changing kind of your scenery and doing stuff different, that community. I keep being reminded how important that is. And like me, honestly, man, I've struggled finding that community through church. And, in other words, I think when I hear a lot of guys talking, they're like, they may go to a church frequently and they're just struggling getting fit, getting connected, getting fit in, you know what I mean? And I think they want it. Like I want it. I want that spiritual connection. I think a lot about, like spiritual growth, because I think spiritual growth is the most important thing for me. But yet I also struggle, and I hear other guys struggling about how to get that spiritual growth, because I think I've always thought church, that's how I'm going to get it. And, I think that some people do find that spiritual connection. And then some people find it through maybe they're, an AA group or NA group or one of those. What would you tell a guy that's like struggling, trying to find that connection, as he's going through like his growth and he wants to spiritually grow. Yeah. You know what I mean? Yeah. But he's really struggling to connect maybe in that spiritual way with other Christians or.
Yeah. So those things you mentioned, they're all good. Your AA groups, your church, anything like that. But, like today, this is the first time I've met you. So me and you are going to know each other a little bit today. But to really get to know you, we're going to have to spend some time together. Yeah. And so that's what I tell those guys at the rehab. The more time that you spend with the Lord and with people that know the Lord, have a relationship with the Lord, to me, man, it's all about relationship and relationship with the Lord. And that's what, when Andy first told me in the beginning, what's the Lord telling you? I didn't have a clue what he was talking about. I didn't know we could hear from the Lord, hear the voice of the Lord. It says in the word that my sheep hear my voice and they follow me, but I didn't know all that stuff. But I pressed in and I just kept going after it and kept going after it. And I finally started hearing his voice, and I was hearing it early on, didn't realize I was hearing it. And then I'd get down the road a little ways and look back and I'd be like, wow, I understand now, Lord. And so he did some things like that. But if you're going after that relationship with him, there's no way that he's not going to show up, So the more time that we spend in relationship with him, whether that's reading your Bible, whether that's going to church, whether that's going to small groups, AA, whatever you're doing, but just things that are positive, going after that spiritual connection, which I like to call relationship with our Father that loves us. So,
how's your family life changed since in the 15 years of sobriety and?
Yeah, it's great. That's what me and my wife are doing better now than even when we first started dating, and it's just the Lord's done a complete turnaround in our relationship. That's what, we'd been together for 9 years, and I got March 10th of '08 is when I got in trouble, and April 23rd, me and her ended up getting married, and that's what I felt like the Lord was dealing with me about early on. Was I've been with her, we've had 2 kids, I've never made that right, in marriage. And so I told her, that I was kind of feeling like we were supposed to get married, but didn't feel like it was fair to her if I was going to go to prison. And she said, well, let's get married anyway. And so we did. And just when we got married, the Lord, he did something in me and her's relationship, our kids' relationship. And so, all the tough stuff that we went through together, me and her, in those 9 years before I started into recovery, has made us a lot tougher, in all the stuff. We still go through stuff like any other married couple does, but we've went through the worst of it. I hope. I can't see anything being any worse than what happened before and how bad I was to her and all those things. So It's been a really good last 15 years, and I'm just looking forward to it staying that way.
I mean, I think that's kind of like the thing. It's like, man, I think we almost all these stories start out the same. It's like you feel like as at some point in life that you're really missing something. You like have this void. You go out and do drugs or alcohol or whatever you do. It may be sex. It may be to fill this void. And then like once you realize that that's a dead end road and you change your mind and you decide, man, I'm not doing this anymore. And you, powerless over it. You realize that it's ruining your life. And then, like for me, I wanted to go, like maybe let's say alcohol wasn't my number one that I went to, and then I'm like, so whenever I quit drinking, then I wanted to go to number two, and the number two wasn't that good either, or maybe number three, whatever it is.
Yeah.
And so I started realizing it's like, man, these things that you almost feel like, man, I got to rethink everything because this is not good. Because if I go to number two, it's going to cause me to go back to drinking. If I go to number three, it's going to cause me to go back to this thing. And so you almost have, for a little bit, and I think that's where, for me, the irritability and the discontent and all that stuff came from because I'm like, I felt like at one point I didn't even really know how to live, or cope with life or whatever. Like in my situation, I didn't realize that the drinking was really making me have these suicidal thoughts. And that part was driving me crazy because I have people, my family and friends that had committed suicide. I'm like, part of me hated them, very pissed off because they had done that, when they knew better, shouldn't have done that. Look at how selfish they were. But then I'm having these same thoughts. And I didn't realize that a lot of it came from the drinking, in other words, my mind wasn't thinking straight. My two cousins committed suicide and they were they were drinking when they did it, and yet I was kind of following that same path, what I'm saying? And so then whenever I got sober, I was like, I was struggling, trying to figure out how to do things differently and how to, and for me, I had to do a lot of mechanical stuff. I always talk about that. Like I knew prayer was important, but I was like struggling with it. So I would just mechanically, like I read something when I was in treatment that said in the big book, and it said, it basically said, don't pray for yourself, pray for other people, and that stuck with me. I just said, okay. And I just literally, prayed for, I'd pray for all of my family and, each my kids, and I'd pray for friends, and I'd pray. And I just did that mechanically. I'd be like, name them, and I'd pray. And then, and so and it felt very mechanical. It just, but then I just kept doing it. I just kept doing it over and over again. And then, recently, the last 6 months or whatever, I would walk every morning. And then, in that walk, I wouldn't listen to music. I wouldn't listen to, anything else. I wouldn't play on my phone. I would just really pray for my family members, friends. And then some days I would do I call it kind of doing a gratitude deal, like everything I was thankful for. That's, because I'd heard somebody talking about that, so I'm thankful for this and on and on. And for 45 minutes, just, doing those things. And then part of that time was also just being quiet and, some people call it meditation, but just really trying to stay focused on the present and try to listen and see what God had. But I remember the time period, and some days it's still the same where it feels mechanical. It's just like I'm doing what I'm supposed to do. But I think those things really helped me, even though it was, again, mechanical. I think that, it's because God's been an important part of my life for a long time. I mean, there's no doubt in my mind that was the key. But I had maybe through just, wrong thinking or wrong teaching or wrong whatever, I'd really struggled with the prayer issue because it's like, man, I felt like God was not a vending machine where I could just throw in a bunch of prayers and then him spit out whatever I wanted, And then I think my will getting in, kind of, confusing it. Like, oh, I want this really bad. And we talked about that recently. That was a big revelation to realize one of the good things for me about not praying for myself is that my will was getting too involved. I was thinking that that's what God wanted. When it comes to find out, no, that's really what I wanted. And so, I think about my kids, I pray for a situation with them maybe. And, and again, recently it dawned on me, it's like, who cares about my kids more than me or God? who cares more? And it's like, I put that on my heart. And I'm thinking, okay, I know he cares about him more, but that was, but I was kind of wanting to control, the situation. But, I'm praying for this because I think it's best for them. But, God put it on my heart that who do you think cares about your kids more, me or you? And, I could only answer that he does. And if he does and he has their best interest at heart, then I think that was an example for me recently where I was like, I got to turn that over too, instead of trying to control it. Of course, I want the best for my kids, but I realize that he wants better for them than I do, And those were, just kind of some of the stuff that I went through, just trying to figure it out,
Yeah.
But I think the community is a big deal. When we're talking about our focus of like the different focuses I was mentioning to you of the not-for-profit, community is like a big part of every single one of those things. It's like finding, I don't know, somebody you can relate to, somebody you can get advice from, somebody you can, trust. I think trust is a big deal. Like me, I struggle trusting people, I was like, you feel like, man, do they have their best interest, my best interest or whatever, or really, I don't know. I'm sure you struggle with that too at times, like trusting people and trying to, deal with that. So,
yeah.
Well, man, I sure appreciate it. I've heard a lot of amazing things about your story, and man, I think it's very inspirational, and I appreciate you taking the time to talk. And I do, you mentioned it. It's like, man, I think there's a great opportunity for us to become friends and get to know. And I think that there's a lot there. Anything else you want to talk about that we hadn't talked about or covered?
I don't know. When you were talking a while ago, the Lord he just showed me, like we try to fill that spot, that empty spot inside that you were talking about a while ago. We try to fill it with drugs, sex, alcohol, whatever it is that we try to fill it with. And that's what I tell the guys at the rehab over there. If you fill that spot with the Lord and you can pour it out into somebody else, he's just going to keep filling it up. And there's no feeling that I ever got from meth, marijuana, any of the drugs, alcohol, any of that stuff that I did. I've never had the feeling that feels like when the Lord works through you to affect someone else in a positive way. I get the chills, talking about things like that. And so that feeling there replaces that. And that feeling we can have all the time if we're walking out his will for our lives, instead of, we want to be selfish. And that's what I still get in that selfish mode. I mean, I'd be lying to you if I said I didn't. I get in that selfish mode, but as quick as I catch myself, I try to get back into the will of him, because I enjoy allowing the Lord to work through me to affect others. And that's what we're here for. We're here to love the Lord, and we're here to love each other and be here from each other. And so that community thing that you're talking about, that's part of how we're designed, to love the Lord and to love people. And so community, it's huge, and finding those people that you can trust and walking out relationship with them too. So.
I mean, you mentioned it, and I think it's a great question or thought. It's like, man, what if they're just, again, they're going through the same thing you and I are talking about. They're struggling, trying to figure it out, and they want God's will in their life. And then, you said that I think the way you described it is that just feeling his presence and being a little, but yeah, they may hear that and they're like, man, I want God's will, but I don't know what to do, and I think we're do people. We want to do, what do we do? But in the most simplest way, like for a guy, he's like trying to find his way. He knows that God's the answer. He wants God's will in his life. He wants to be able to turn his will over to God. He wants to be able to live that way, but he's struggling figuring out how, and he hears like, not in what you're saying, but a lot of times if you listen to, like, I call them churchy people, that it's like they use a lot of religious jargon. You don't, but I'm saying you hear it a lot.
Yeah.
And he's like being holy and just words.
Yeah.
But those words have been around so long that they don't even know I'm talking about the guy listening doesn't know what it means. He's like, I want to be these things.
Yeah.
But I don't know how.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I want to follow God's will, but I don't know how. And What's your thoughts or your advice in that situation? Like, you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah,
There's
yeah,
lost.
exactly.
They're like, man, I want God.
Yeah. So find those people that they're walking it out in front of you and you see and you're like, I want what that guy's got. I know where he's been. I know what he's been through. Find those people in your life, whether you know them well or not, but go to them. Don't be afraid to ask for help. And hey, how'd you get there? How'd you get to where you're at? Spend time with those people. That's what Andy and Charlie, a bunch of the guys that I named off earlier, that's what I spent time with those guys. And just if people's pouring into your life, you're hanging out with the right people and they're encouraging you and pouring out things into your life. And the churchy deal, I don't like all those terms and stuff. And some of that's just, like you said, it's been around forever. And it's just, I look for the real people, the people that are out there just being real. Man, I love to tell people all the time, I am far, far, far from perfect, but I'm way better than I was 15 years ago. And I'm not where I want to be in 15 more years, so I don't try to put out anything that like I'm holier than thou or I'm better than other people. I've got my struggles. You've got your struggles. We all do. But just find those people that have what you want and spend time with them, and that's what relationship with the Lord and relationship with each other. We rub off on each other. Those guys rubbed off on me. Their love for the Lord and their love for people, it rubbed off on me until I got, to where I understood to hear the voice of the Lord and those things. And then, but you still need people, even after you're in relationship with the Lord and hearing a lot of things from the Lord, we still need people. We still need people to be able to bounce stuff off of. So that would be my encouragement, is to find those people, in your life. We all have them, people that we look up to, whether they know it or not, whether we know them well or not, but reach out to those people. Don't be afraid to reach out and ask questions and
I think asking for help is a big part of that, man. It's like,
it is.
Our
pride gets in the way.
Yeah. I mean, we live, whether you're talking about work or you're talking about personal problems or whatever, we struggle asking for help. Know? And I think guys are even worse, to me. It's like,
we can fix it.
Like for me I had to finally get to this place. I was worried about my job and worried about this and that and worried about what people think. And, and once I got over that and said, basically, screw it. I got to figure this out, cause in my case, I felt like I was going to be dead if I didn't figure it out. I mean, I was drinking myself to death. Instead of putting a gun to my head, I was drinking myself to death, and I'd been doing that for a while. And, when I didn't want to live like that anymore, and I think that was kind of my moment, it's like, man, when I realized that, I was, I kind of hated the people in my life who killed themselves. And here I was too scared or too whatever to do the same thing. But I had these thoughts all the time. But here I was drinking myself to death. And somehow through it justifying it that it was better than putting a gun to your head, And when I realized that wasn't, I'm like, man, what am I doing? I am going to end up dead. And I think that was the, aha moment or the moment for me, and you're right, because part of it's like, I started thinking about I always tell this story. It's like, man, I thought everybody drank. Like, so when I quit drinking, I'm like, man, I struggled, couldn't go to anything. And I felt like people were drinking, everybody was drinking. But then I started realizing, man, there's a ton of people who don't drink. I didn't even know. I had people reaching out to me on Facebook and cause I had maybe said something like, well, at my 1 year of sobriety, I put it out there. I was like, man, I was just kind of did a little deal about it. And I had people reach out, oh yeah, I hadn't drank in 2 years. And, and I was like, and I felt like God put those in my life because, for a while there, I just thought I was the only one who didn't do these things or didn't want to do them anymore. But I think that God put these people in my life that it was like, man, we don't either.
Yeah.
It's not good for us either, and I'm like, wow, okay. And, but all along the way, also putting people in my life that were different than I thought. Like I have a guy that I met that lives here locally. We're just so different, meaning that, just different. And, I don't know that we'd be friends outside of coming together based on, recovery, coming together based on God. And man, it really opened my eyes, because it's like, this is, these are true friendships. These are things that you can build a bond with and you can grow together. And you may not see eye to eye on anything else, but you're seeing eye to eye on spiritual matters. You're seeing eye to eye on, let's just not drink, or those things. And I mean, it's made a huge difference. And I feel like if I need something, I can call them. And I think that so much of the time, and that's what we're started talking about, to circle back, it's like so much of the time, like I was just scared to ask for help. Yeah. Fear is a horrible driver. Yeah. It really is. It's, you know this, but like fear and just afraid to get caught, afraid to, I think about like relationship as doing stuff you shouldn't be doing. And then you're scared to get caught. Well, how that ruins that relationship. It can just, it's never what it should be. Yeah. And I think same thing with fear of God. We're talking about spiritual matters. It's like, if you think that God just doesn't care and he's going to zap you, or that he could care less if you fail or succeed, then man, a lot of stuff's driven by fear. A lot of stuff is driven by fear.
Comes from the enemy.
Yeah.
He's always after us. Yeah. Fear is one of his
biggest. A lot about resentments. And I think, like, for me, I didn't struggle. Resentment was there, but I think guilt was there for me more than resentments. And I think guilt, I always say guilt's not from God. Yeah. Because God's not sitting there saying, look at the past, look what you did. Look what you did. That's the enemy doing that, right? And I think that, like, for me, I lived in guilt, which is another way to say that I lived in the past. Yeah. You know what I mean? Because I'm always thinking about the past and what's going on back there and what did I do? And I don't have the story that, like, a lot of guys, they're forced to get a paper signed through drug court. They're forced to do these things. And a lot of them, man, do end up, doing well because they were forced to at the beginning, and then they want to go on their own. So I think it's great. Yeah. And on the same point, you have guys like me. I didn't go in there because I was forced to. I go in there because I'm at the end of my rope. Yeah. And I'm at that point where I'm like, I'm going to die, or I'm going to get this figured out.
For people in recovery, that's what we'll be talking about. I'm going back in tonight to the rehab to talk to the guys about forgiving themselves, because I forgave everybody else. That was the easier part. But forgiving this guy right here, the enemy wants to remind us of everything back there behind us. And then that takes our focus off the Father and going forward. And that's what, I share. I'm 100% transparent with those guys. There was people that died of overdose on my drugs. There was a kid that took his life, high on my drugs, and committed suicide. I had a daughter that didn't know I was her dad till she was 17 years old because I was being selfish. Her mom was pregnant with her, and then my mom got killed in a car wreck. And after my mom got killed in a car wreck, before my daughter was born, I'd already got spun out on meth and threatened her mom, that not to mess with me about the child because I was being selfish and didn't want the responsibility of a child. So there was a lot of things, beating on my wife, all those things. I had to forgive myself for those things so the Lord could restore them. And now me and my daughter, we have a great relationship. I have 3 granddaughters. Mm-hmm. And so, the Lord brought all that stuff back and he restored all that stuff. But I had to let go of it. I had to receive that forgiveness that Jesus died on the cross for us to have, and let go of that so I can go forward with my relationship with the Father and affecting other people's lives, letting him work through me. So that forgiving ourselves is a big deal. It's a huge deal in recovery, and it's just something that I believe is a have to, because the enemy, he wants to remind us of that stuff all the time. But if we'll turn that stuff loose to the Lord, we can use all that stuff back there that the enemy wanted for harm. We can use it for his good if we just turn our lives and will over to him. So I
think that as you go through this process, again, you realize that resentment has no place in your life. There's no place for it. Mm-hmm. Guilt has no place in your life. Fear has no place in your life. When you go down any, and we talk about honesty, how you have to be honest, and I agree with that. But I think that dishonesty comes from those things. Like we want to be dishonest about our past, or we want to be dishonest about something we've done because of fear. But it really, the honesty or dishonesty points to one of those things: guilt, resentments, fears. And again, fear is just a crazy driver because you'll do all kinds of things out of fear. Like for me, I didn't realize that. Like if you'd asked me, "Are you selfish?" Were you selfish? I'd be like, "No," because I was in the business of taking care of people and doing all kinds of good things for people, but the selfishness really came from, for me, came from like not thinking about other people's feelings and thoughts and needs first. It was like thinking about my own needs and feelings first. And part of that was self-pity, and self-pity doesn't have any room in our life either, because same thing. It's like if I'm worried about me, thinking about me all the time, then I can't think about other people. I want to kind of end it with this deal, Van, but I wanted to ask your thoughts on this. And it's kind of, I like to talk about stuff that I'm thinking about recently, or I've been on my heart or whatever. And, one of the things that has really come to me is that, I saw some train of thought, but is the idea that, they talk about like blocking yourself off from God. And one of the things that I've kind of realized recently, it's not God leaving, but it's us. Like when those things get in our head, like fear and resentments or any of those things, then we block ourselves off from God. In other words, we switch these gears from like willingness to, I've realized, is the key. Willingness, you got to be willing every day. Willing to what? Willing to follow God, willing to hear what he's got to say, willing to know his will, willing to work, whatever, do what you're supposed to do. And then, but I think that when you let one of those things enter, you switch this gear from willingness to basically closing yourself off from God. Like you can't hear it both ways. It's almost like covering your ears. I'm not listening anymore. And then you get in that cycle of, whatever, fear, all the things we're talking about. And it's very difficult to get back to that point of like just willing and listening. And, in the past, I didn't believe this, but there was a part of it that did. Like, I wouldn't have said it out loud that, I was cutting myself off from God. And I didn't believe that, I still don't believe, and I didn't believe that God's leaving or he just don't want any part of it. But I kind of struggle with that, like realizing that, I'm doing it to myself. I'm cutting myself off. I'm not listening anymore. I'm going down this other path. And so I have to be I feel like I need to be very mindful of those moments when I head toward that direction of, again, any of those things, fear or resentments or guilt or self-pity. What's your thoughts on that? I mean, would you agree with that, or would you have a different take on it?
It makes me think of something that I do with the guys at the rehab a lot, and because worry is another one when you're talking about the fear and stuff. Worry is another big one, but it's all stuff from the enemy. And as long as he's got us, I like to just move my hand around, like looking around me, straight around me, and tell him as long as our focus is on all of this, we're missing out what he's got for us. And I like to point up towards the Father. And I said, as soon as I catch myself not focusing on the Father and focusing on all this stuff, I get my focus back there as quick as I can. And he'll take care. If we got our focus here, he's going to take care of all the rest of this stuff out here in life, fear, worry, all those things. And it's a constant battle. I mean, it's every day. I have worries. I have fears. I have all the enemy. He does not quit. He comes after us all the time, but it's just the Lord. He's my default mechanism, and just get back in his presence as quick as I can. And when I catch myself out of his presence. And so
good stuff. Well, man, if he wanted to reach out to you, or maybe, whatever way, what's the best way for them to maybe reach out to you or contact you, whether it be email or it be phone or what? What's the best
They can find me on Facebook, message me there. My number's 580-928-7218. I talk to people all the time. My number's out there everywhere. So, I'm always willing to listen and try to help.
Well, again, man, I appreciate your time. I really do. That means a lot to me. This thing is important to me. And so for you to take your time and come talk to me, and man, that means a lot. And I'm so grateful also that I listened, because I heard many people that I needed to talk to you, and I'm glad that we were able to connect. And, man, you do have an inspirational story. You really did. I'm so interested in the way people's lives are being changed. How I'm so interested in what makes a difference in their lives, and you have that story. And I think that you're more, I appreciate you being willing to share it and talk about it, and with a guy you didn't know. That means a lot.
You're very welcome, and thanks for having me on.
And thank you guys for listening. Again, a good way to connect with us is evenonlets.com. Just a reminder that we have our mixer/introduction event for our nonprofit here in Elk City, Oklahoma. I can't think. 105 South Main, I think that's right. It's at United Country Realty and Exploration. It's at that office. So that's on September 16th at 6 o'clock. We would love to have you guys be a part of it. Hope you guys have a great day.
Thank you for listening to Positively Undefeated. If there was something in this show that resonated with you, please share the show with your community. Want this show delivered each Monday morning to your podcast app of choice, please subscribe or follow. And if you'd like to get a hold of Burl, please do so by going to burlstricker.com/contact.